This week on Hot Shot Sports, we're talking NBA All-Star Game, Team USA at the Olympics, and MLB is getting started. Stay tuned. WMCM's Hot Shot Sports is next. Welcome into Hot Shot Sports. I'm David Gasper. Alongside me are Hunter Baumgart and Charlie Shreve. So, the first thing we want to talk about, the NBA All-Star Game was on this past Sunday, and Team LeBron beat Team Steph 148 to 145. And guys, what are just your initial reactions to this game?
I think to start off, it was you saw a little more competitiveness this year. I feel like in past years, it's just kind of been a Harlem Globetrotters sort of game that you see in the All-Star Game. But overall, I enjoyed watching it a little more than past years.
I mean, initially what comes to mind for me is the overall competitiveness was so much better. I think part of that was picking the teams. It seemed like LeBron and Steph had a lot of pride in the teams they picked, and that played a huge role with it as well.
Yeah, there was this new fantasy draft kind of captains format where they picked the two captains, LeBron James, Steph Curry, and they just kind of picked their own guys instead of the old Eastern Conference, Western Conference formats. And I think that went over really well. It kind of made it a more evenly matched game because Western Conference is really kind of dominated with a lot better players and better teams. And I feel like that new format worked. I just think they should televise the draft for next year.
Absolutely. I think that was key, and LeBron and Steph said that right after. They're like, this needs to be televised. It was great fun, and I hope they keep this format up because I loved it.
And it wasn't just, and like you said, they're more enthusiastic, and it seemed like they cared more about winning than in past years. And it's weird because you would almost think that they would have some pride playing for their conference, but apparently not. Apparently it was more like, okay, well, I picked this team, I was picked by LeBron or Steph to be on this team, and so it seemed more like they're more enthusiastic, they're more competitive in the game.
Yeah, and they were able to kind of have a bit more fun with it because they were playing with like the guys they wanted to, guys they normally wouldn't play with, because Giannis never really plays with Steph Curry. It doesn't happen, and now that he gets a chance to be on a team with him and just kind of learn from him, just kind of see what these star players could really do if they're on a team together, and I think it worked out really well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I think it was cool to see that. Like you talked about Giannis being able to play with Steph. I think it was really cool to see some of those players get to play with players that, like Harden and Giannis. Like, because of course, being a Bucks fan, I'm interested in what Giannis is going to do. So it was interesting to see him play with some of those Western Conference stars.
And I think that for next time, if they keep this up and they televise it, it'll add another part to the game because there'll be that trash talking of like who's the first pick and who got picked when. So when everybody's aware of that,
because you don't want to be the last guy picked in the All-Star game.
Absolutely.
Because, and Giannis was saying if he was the captain, he would have picked LeBron, and Steph said he picked Giannis because he didn't want to get dunked on by him because that would have just been embarrassing.
Yeah, the dunk heard around the world.
Yep.
So let's move on now. The Winter Olympics are going on in Pyeongchang, South Korea right now. And Team USA has really kind of been getting off to a struggling start. They only have 12 medals so far, and they're on track for their lowest medal count since the Nagano 1998 Olympics. And this has really just kind of been a struggle this time around.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It doesn't give me a lot of hope for this year. Well, and the future, kind of see where the athletes in our country are going, and maybe other countries are starting to really, even out with the United States.
I'd say a bright spot though for me was definitely seeing old man Shaun White go out there. And he was great out there, and you notice his air is so much higher than everybody else's, and he can do things that just nobody else can, still at this age, and that's incredible.
Yeah, running back-to-back 1440s or whatever they call it. I mean, there's just so much lingo that goes on with snowboarding and the half pipe that a lot of people just don't get. And thankfully, my roommate's a snowboarder, so he can just explain all these things to me so I know what's going on. But it's been really interesting, and snowboarding has really been the only medals that USA has really kind of gotten much in. Ever since kind of those big snowboarding events have stopped, there really haven't been really any medals for the U.S. And Norway has kind of taken a commanding lead in these Olympics.
I mean, that's a big surprise. I mean, not for Winter Olympics because you'd expect Norway to be decent, but just because they're a pretty small country, and for them to be out there competing with all the big boys, it's pretty sweet to see.
And one of the bright spots was, some young people are doing well, and we do have some, hope for the future, I guess, was the snowboarder, is his name, Red Gerard.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool to see him do. And then I saw him in a couple of interviews, and he's an Olympian, but he's you got to remember, he's still 16 or 17.
He's 17.
So he's going to interview like he's a 16, 17-year-old. So he's going to have immature answers, and that was just kind of cool to see him get some publicity with that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of very young U.S. Olympians that have done really well. Red Gerard and Chloe Kim's another one, 17 years old, dominating the women's snowboard halfpipe. But some of the other big stars on this U.S. Olympic team have really kind of not done much. Mikaela Shiffrin missed out on the podium in her best event, the slalom, coming in a disappointing 4th when she was kind of going for 5 golds in this Olympics. And Lindsay Jacobellis in the snowboard cross, she missed the podium as well, finishing in 4th. And there's just been a lot of the big name stars that have just finished just off the podium.
I know I was super disappointed because it seems like Lindsay Jacobellis has been around forever. That's a huge name in women's snowboarding. And to see her miss it, that was extremely disappointing.
And Lindsey Vonn is another who didn't get on the podium for one event. I think she had another one today possibly. And then Ted Ligety didn't do well in his event either. So some of those older names that you kind of are familiar with, they're kind of starting to phase out a little bit.
Yeah, and there have been some events that the U.S. is just traditionally not that good in, but the ones that the U.S. is strongest in, snowboarding, freestyle skiing, they've just been missing out on those podiums, and for that they've just been dropping off in the medal count. They're in 6th in the medal count, which USA normally is at winning in every single Olympics.
I can't remember the last time the Olympics were going on, and I go up and they always show the medal count. It's just so weird to see us this low. It's really something I'm not used to yet.
No, definitely, and I hope it's not something we have to get used to as years go by. I hope it's something that, okay, we get past these Olympics, and in 2020 in the summer, and then the 2022 Winter Olympics, I hope it's something different.
Yeah, so that should definitely be a story to watch going forward. U.S. training, trying to get better at a lot of these sports, kind of bringing in a newer, younger crowd. Let's head on now to warm weather. MLB spring training just got underway. Full teams are reporting this week, and there are 31 camps in spring training this year, with the extra team being the free agent camp in Bradenton, Florida at IMG Academy, because there have just been so many free agents that have been left unsigned throughout this offseason in baseball.
It's weird. I don't remember an off season like this, ever in my lifetime. And it's not only, sure, there's going to be people who are unsigned heading into spring training. There always is, but it's more the star power that it's been not signed.
Definitely, and I think something that impacts this a lot is everyone's talking about next year's free agency. I mean, you got the big names like Bryce Harper, and everybody wants to save money. You don't want to throw it all in now, but finally, we saw guys like Hosmer get signed, and then we also saw J.D. Martinez get signed the other day to a 5-year, $110 million deal.
Yeah, so there have been a lot of big contracts that have come down in the last week. Yu Darvish to the Cubs, Eric Hosmer to the Padres, J.D. Martinez finally gets a deal with the Red Sox, and now the top of the class is finally starting to go. There's still a lot of big players like Jake Arrieta, Alex Cobb, Lance Lynn atop the pitching market, and there's still a lot of really good position players out there that are still looking for homes, and it's something that you don't normally see. And the players are, they're over 30. Like, they're on the wrong side of 30. Teams now with the analytics movement are not looking to overpay for the decline years of those big free agents because they've been burned by it in the past.
I mean, you look at some of these huge contracts and you see like David Price, he hasn't done anything since signing that. I think it was $217 for 7 years.
Yep.
And you see all these big contracts for these old pitchers especially. And old pitchers, everyone knows their arms they run out eventually. So teams aren't willing to give these huge contracts to these arms anymore, and we're seeing it right now.
And it seems like those pitchers are asking for that money, and that might be a reason that they're not signed. I'm interested in like how far we're going to get into spring training until you get Arrieta, Lance Lynn, and Alex Cobb signed. Because if you think about it, spring training is when your team gets, they start camp, and then they start, building their team in that chemistry. And so when the chemistry eventually is, you want that chemistry to be there on opening day. So signing a guy a week before is not going to be, positive for your team necessarily.
Especially with pitchers and starting pitchers, because they need to get that relationship with their catchers, so they can understand what they like to do in certain situations. And another guy, Jonathan Lucroy, he's still available on the open market. He was a great player for the Brewers for several years. They traded him to Texas. He didn't do much there last year. They ended up trading him to Colorado. And he's still an unsigned free agent. And there are not a lot of teams that need starting catchers. And he's still on the open market.
And it's super weird to see that, because it seemed 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, Lucroy was one of the biggest catchers to get. Everybody wanted him when he went to Texas. And he played all right. He didn't play great, but it's still weird to see a player of his caliber not signed yet.
Yeah, I guess the theme with all these free agents is that they're all older, and that we may be used to these names, but eventually it's going to be the young guys like Bryce Harper and Manny Machado and the younger guys who are going to start phasing these people out. So maybe it's just that people over 30 aren't the future of the MLB, which is weird to think about.
Yeah, and I mean that's because you got guys like Bryce Harper, Manny Machado. They're going to hit free agency at 26 next year, as opposed to some of these guys at 30, 31. So moving on now to the Brewers. They've made a couple of big offseason moves. They signed Lorenzo Cain to a 5-year, $80 million contract. They traded 4 players for Christian Yelich from the Miami Marlins, including top prospect Lewis Brinson. And they've kind of made the move that they're going all in for this year. They are going to be ready to contend. They've got those guys. They signed Yolis Chacin to a 2-year contract. And what do you make of the moves that the Brewers have made and how they position themselves for this year?
It's going to be, number one, I'm really excited to watch them because of the star power. Like, with Yelich and Cain in the outfield, I mean, they're just going to be running all over. I'm really excited. I'm glad Cain came back. I think something that Mark Antanasio, the owner of the Brewers, said today in spring training, they had their first team workout, and he said, we're with the guys that we have in the clubhouse right now, we can make it to the playoffs. So they're confident as an organization. So as a fan, I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we saw last year they were not expected to do much, and we saw a bunch of young guys step up, and they played really well, and they didn't lose a ton of those pieces, a ton of those young pieces, while they got these new guys.
Yeah.
And like the contract for Lorenzo Cain, that's actually really nice. They have him through his age 35 season. So I mean, basically use him up while he's good, and he'll be done. And then Yelich, I think, will be a great addition. They have one of the best outfields in the game for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely loved the Yelich trade. Yeah. I thought it was definitely worth what you give up, because Lewis Brinson, he was a very hyped prospect. And Christian Yelich is basically everything you could hope Lewis Brinson would become, except he's established, he's a veteran, and he's still under control for about the same amount of time as Brinson was. So I thought that was a great move. You didn't give up any of your pitching prospects, which was great. The Cain move still kind of puzzles me, because the Brewers have been hoarding outfielders for the past couple years. They already have too many, and they needed to get rid of some of them. And instead they just added 2 more in Yelich and Cain. And Cain, I think it was a year too long for me. I think it was just a little bit too much, and it kind of ate up the rest of the payroll that they could have spent on a pitcher or some other position.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just for me, what I like about it is he was an MVP candidate when the Royals were always in the run for the World Series, and I just think he brings a lot to the table veteran-wise, because they still have a lot of young guys. So I think he'll be an important piece for the chemistry as well.
It's interesting. What we said at the beginning of the offseason was, okay, we need to, if we're going to go for it now, we need to go out and the Brewers need to get a pitcher, and they need to solidify that rotation. What do they do? And when we said they have a lot of depth at the outfield position. So what do? They go out and get 2 outfielders. So very interesting that they went out and did that. So we'll see. They're thinking about moving Braun to first base. That'll be interesting.
All right, well, we need to step aside for a quick break, and let's take a look at some of those WMCM show promos.
For the fun side of sports, from debates to memes to highlights, don't miss Hot Shot Sports, Tuesday afternoons on WMCM on Campus 200 and Charter 989.
WMCM's Hot.
For the fun side of sports, from debates to memes to highlights, don't miss Hot Shot Sports, Tuesday afternoons on WMCM on Campus 200 and Charter 989.
All right, it is time for one of our favorite games, Cheers, Jeers, and Tears. Let's kind of get this started. My cheer, it's going to go to Red Gerard of the U.S. Olympic team. He won slopestyle gold against all odds, basically. He had basically snowboarding royalty all going behind him. Marcus Cleveland, Max Perot, Mark McMorris all went after him, and two of them fell. One was just a point short of knocking him off the top spot. And the key part about his story is that the day before, like the day of the competition, he overslept because he was on a Netflix binge, and he lost his coat too. So he had to wake up late, somehow find his coat, and he still won gold. Wow.
What a guy. A little older than him is LeBron James. Now, he is my cheer. 14th straight All-Star game. He got the MVP of the All-Star game this year at 34 years old. Just incredible what he's been able to do through his career, and still at this age be able to be one of the best, or well, the best in the NBA right now, and get that MVP, which you would expect maybe to go to a younger player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, LeBron James still doing it, has no signs of slowing down.
No.
Yeah. And for my cheer, I'm going to bring it back to baseball. Just talking about Eric Hosmer finally getting paid from 3rd overall pick in 2011 to World Series champion, and now he's making $144 million over the next 8 years with the Padres. So good for him.
Yeah, very big contract. Finally getting that big deal that he's been holding out for.
Absolutely.
So now let's move on to jeers, and this jeer, this is probably one of the worst things. Fergie did the national anthem at the NBA All-Star Game, and we have a clip of it, and just take a listen and just see how it was.
Still there. Oh, say, does that star spangled banner yet wave? For the land of the free.
Fergie just absolutely botching it at a couple of these points. Oh my goodness. I mean, that was something, the banner yet wave part where it's just, it just went on forever.
It's been a while since we've seen a performance like this. Don't want to rehash it too much, but it kind of reminds me of JT and Janet Jackson back in the day, just a train wreck.
Yeah, I think this might have been worse than Roseanne when she did hers, where she basically made a mockery of the national anthem, and like she spit afterwards, and like she sang it bad on purpose. But like that was like supposed to be a joke, and I mean it was a very bad joke, but like she was intending to be bad, and Fergie tried to be good.
Yeah. My jeer was Kevin Kiermaier of the Tampa Bay Rays. After Odorizzi, Longoria, and Dickerson, three really good players on the Rays last year, were all traded away or signed with other teams during the offseason. After just going 80 and 82, Kiermaier was very upset. He said, "I'm 100% frustrated, very upset with the moves that the team made. No beating around the bush. It's one of those things that makes you scratch your head. You don't know the reasoning why." So it looks like he's not very happy over there in Tampa Bay.
All right, let's quick run through some tiers. My tier has to go to defense. NBA All-Star Game, once again, 148, 145, not much defense.
My tier was the medal count for the United States. We talked about it earlier. We need to step it up as a country.
Definitely. And my tier is especially hard for me as I wear a Dallas Mavs jersey. Mark Cuban, the owner of the Mavs, openly said that losing is now the Mavs' best option and they will openly tank. So that's pretty sad.
That is sad. So let's move on now. The Super Bowl was a couple weeks ago, and always a big part of the Super Bowl commercials. Those are always a very big talking point, and there's always a list of best and worst. What do you guys think was among the best Super Bowl ads?
I think one of the best ones was Alexa loses her voice. I thought that was just creative with technology that these days everybody's using those kind of things, Siri, and now all the competitors like Alexa. So it was really, I thought that was a clever commercial.
Mm-hmm. I liked that one. What I really enjoyed was, it was kind of a series, but when they did the Tide ads. Oh, yeah. The Tide ad. And when me and my roommates watched, what really changed the game of advertising is when they got the Old Spice guy on the horse, and then they're going, and he goes, "Wait, where am I? Oh, I'm in a Tide ad."
Yeah, I love
really
that one.
That a lot.
That was great. And then the Mr. Clean being in Tide ad and everything, and that was, oh man, that was a really great job by them. Thankfully, Tide was in the news for something other than people eating their laundry pods.
Yes.
So, but now among just some of the worst ads, I think Bud Light really kind of disappointed with their Dilly Dilly series. I mean, they had such a big build up to it, and then the final commercial just kind of fell flat. It didn't do much.
I felt like I didn't see one that stuck out as bad, but like I felt like it was down from previous years. I feel like in previous years there were better commercials overall.
What I was noticing was there was just more obscureness. There was a lot of things like Keanu Reeves standing and flying on a motorcycle up in the air, like things that I think they're really trying to just put something in your head and just go for something memorable instead of something that made sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and Ram Trucks also kind of had a similar thing where they tried to use a Martin Luther King speech to try to sell their trucks, and it was just it was very poorly put together, and it didn't work. It didn't flow very well at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Just in this year, just some weird commercials.
And I think regarding the Martin Luther one, I think people are just a little upset because using a Martin Luther King speech to promote Ford trucks, that irks some people the wrong way.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And one that I thought was interesting was where I believe it was Mountain Dew or Doritos. They had Morgan Freeman and Peter Dinklage going together. Peter Dinklage was rapping some Busta Rhymes and just spitting straight fire, which is very interesting if you watch Game of Thrones. But yeah, that was another good one. The Morgan Freeman kind of coming in the cool, the ice.
Definitely. And Morgan Freeman has always been as cool as ice his whole career, so it was only fitting that he was ice. Definitely.
You betcha. No, yeah, that was a good one. There were definitely some good ones too.
Yeah. So with the Super Bowl commercials, I mean, the Eagles won Super Bowl. Congratulations to them. So we're going to head to a quick break and take a look at what's happening with Week in Review.
The University of Wisconsin-La Crosse brings you a weekly student newscast. Important news. Movie critiques. Weather forecasts. Sports highlights. And local interviews. UWL's own WMCM, run by the students, for the students. Every Thursday at 4:30 on Campus Channel 200 and Charter Channel 989.
Are you a movie fanatic? Tune in on WMCM TV's Screening Room, Tuesdays at 2:45 or 4:30. You can watch on Channel 200 and Charter 989. See you on Tuesdays for Screening Room.
All right, now it is time for our rant segment, and first up is going to be Hunter.
You bet. So my rant today, I want to know why people are predicting that the Brewers are going to win less games this year than they did last year. If you look at some of the different predictions, Fangraphs, a website that predicts many baseball teams, well, actually the whole league, and has a specific winning number for each team. They predict the Brewers to get 78 wins. I don't understand how you can predict a team that didn't lose hardly anybody from last year, save maybe Anthony Swarzak, who helped them down the stretch as a pitcher. But other than that, really didn't lose any major league talent, lost some minor league talent, but that shouldn't matter. So, and then they gained Lorenzo Cain and Christian Yelich, two former All-Stars, really younger players doing really well. So I'm really interested to wonder as to why people are predicting. 81.5 was another prediction that I saw. So overall, Brewers, they should win as many games as they did last year because they added more talent. So no reason to predict that they're going to win under 80 games. I understand if you're going to predict, say, they're going to go 500, like 81 and 81, maybe, but less than last year, I don't understand it.
I agree. I think that is a little ridiculous, especially with all the talent that they've added.
Yeah.
Now, my rant, I'm going to bring it back to basketball, and I'm talking about the Timberwolves and specifically their defense. First of all, you have a defensive guru and Tom Thibodeau as your coach. You've got a bunch of young, promising talent, and you have vets like Taj Gibson and Jimmy Butler who are excellent at defense. So please explain to me why every time we win a couple games, then the next couple we lose and we have the worst defensive efficiency in the league. This is something that we need to change. I will not stand for it. They need to step this up, or this will be the downfall of the Timberwolves, and our 14-year streak will continue of playofflessness.
Very good point. All right, so MLB has decided to not use the pitch clock for the 2018 season, and that is probably the smartest move MLB has made in a long time. The pitch clock would be the worst thing to ever happen to baseball. It is something that really would just destroy the fabric of the game. It's the only sport that does not have a clock attached to it, and MLB trying to add it would have been an absolute disgrace. And pitchers would not be able to keep up with it. It would injure pitchers more likely, and it just would be something that they would use it to try to maybe get some younger fans to try to make it more exciting, make the game go by quicker. But that's not what would happen. It would not grow the game at all. It would make pitching more dangerous, and it's not what baseball needs to do. And instead, they decided to limit some mound visits, which I get. Some of those can take a while, but that's going to present its own set of problems. So now it's time for mail time. And our first question, should the Brewers sign Jake Arrieta?
I say no. I say they should either sign Alex Cobb, or I'm really for Lance Lynn, a guy who had better stats over his career ERA than Yu Darvish. So I think they can get him for cheaper than Yu Darvish, and I think they should get Lance Lynn.
You know, Arrieta is one of those guys that kind of scares me because he's old, and we saw he's not in his prime anymore. He was in his prime when he was pitching for the Cubs a few years ago, but now people aren't sure about him, and he's really expensive. He's one of those guys we were talking about earlier, one of those old arms that cost too much now, and teams aren't willing to do that anymore.
Yeah, he's 32. He's going to cost way too much. He's already in his decline. Overpaying for him would be a huge mistake. And I like Cobb a bit better, but I'm going to say Brewers are going to trade for Marcus Stroman in July. So I'm going to say that. So second question, did Louisville deserve to lose their national title? That was just announced today.
I think so, but I think the NCAA needs to definitely have more guidelines for their penalties.
Yeah, and this definitely comes full circle with all the Michigan State stuff that's going around, but I think definitely they deserved it. But as you said, the NCAA needs to figure out a better way of handling this right away.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all the time we have this week on Hot Shot Sports. Thanks for tuning in.